There's an ongoing humanitarian crisis in Venezuela, but to understand what's going on right now, we have to look back to the history of it. So in the late 20th century, Hugo Chavez, leader of the Bolivarian Revolution, was working to free corruption from Venezuela. He succeeded, and in 1999 he was elected president. However, his ideology was very unpopular among the people. He made many poor decisions. Even though he was helping out their economy, the things that he did not help out Venezuela. He tried to get them in the UN, but he was denied. He continued making these mistakes to the point where there was an attempted coup against him, but it was failed. However, in 2011, he was diagnosed with cancer and eventually passed in 2013. His understudy, Nicolas Maduro, would then take place. Maduro wouldn't realize, though, that with Venezuela being a petro state, one that heavily relies on oil reserves, he would not realize that the oil prices would drop in 2013. So they dropped, but they continued to spend money, which led to this humanitarian crisis. With no money, there's a food shortage, a corrupt government. All of this just led to the further decline of Venezuela.
As of 2024, there are over 7.7 Venezuelan migrants around the world, making it the largest displacement crisis worldwide. Of those migrants, 84% are in Latin America and the Caribbean, with Colombia, Peru, and Ecuador having the most migrants, and the US coming in fourth. Venezuelan migrants often send remittances to their families and relatives still living in Venezuela, where the inflation rate stands at over 9,000% as of 2022. $1 US is worth over 36,000 Venezuelan bolivars. Some citizens of these South American countries that have received an influx of Venezuelan migrants in recent years complain that their jobs are being taken from them and given to Venezuelans for less pay and more hours of work. But some argue this migration has helped the economies of these countries. According to a study by the IMF, Venezuelan migration tends to mostly increase labor informality in the countries they migrate to, but there is no evidence of displacement of local workers. The Venezuelan government continues to implement a centralized command economy, with the government controlling trade and the production and distribution of goods. The rate of Venezuelan migrants only continues increasing, with a 157% increase from 2022 to 2023.
Addressing the ongoing immigration problem in Venezuela requires a multifaceted approach that considers both short-term relief efforts and long-term policy solutions. I'm going to be discussing some strategies and possible policies. First is to provide immediate humanitarian aid to Venezuelan migrants and refugees, both within Venezuela and in neighboring countries. This includes access to food, shelter, healthcare, and other essential services. Second is to collaborate with international organizations such as the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees and the International Organization for Migration, as well as with neighboring countries to coordinate efforts and share resources for the assistance and integration of Venezuelan migrants. There must be a regional response, which includes fostering regional cooperation among countries to Latin America to develop a unified approach to the Venezuelan migration crisis. This could involve the establishment of regional frameworks for refugee protection, as well as joint efforts to address the root causes of migration and promote stability in the region. Granting temporary protection status to Venezuelan migrants in neighboring countries, allowing them to legally reside and work while the situation in Venezuela remains unstable. While granting protection, Venezuela must also implement integration programs that facilitate the social, economic, and cultural integration of Venezuelan migrants into host communities. This may include language classes, job training, and support for accessing education and healthcare services. Develop policies to regulate the labor market and protect the rights of Venezuelan migrants, including measures to prevent exploitation and discrimination in employment. This can involve partnerships with employers, labor unions, and civil society organizations such as the International Rescue Committee, established in Venezuela to ensure compliance with labor laws and promote decent work for migrants. Politically, there should be diplomatic efforts to address the underlying political and economic crisis in Venezuela and promote a peaceful resolution to the conflict. This may involve diplomatic negotiations, mediation efforts, and international pressure to restore democratic governance and respect for human rights in Venezuela. Raising awareness is also essential for combating this conflict, which includes launching information and awareness campaigns to provide accurate information about migration options, legal rights, and available support services to Venezuelan migrants. Lastly, the development of reintegration programs for Venezuelan migrants who choose to return voluntarily to Venezuela once conditions improve. This may include support for housing, employment, and psychosocial services to facilitate their successful reintegration into society. By implementing these strategies and policies, governments and stakeholders can work together to address the ongoing immigration problem in Venezuela and mitigate its impact on Venezuelan migrants, host communities, and the region as a whole.
The United States is unwavering in our opposition to the authoritarian regime of Nicolas Maduro. Much of the humanitarian crisis can be attributed to Maduro's mismanagement and pattern of corruption. The U.S. has not recognized Maduro as the legitimate president of Venezuela since 2018. As such, we recognize only the National Assembly as the last legitimate branch of Venezuelan government. The U.S. recognizes Juan Guaido as the legitimate interim president of Venezuela since 2018 and will continue to support Juan Guaido and the Venezuelan National Assembly throughout the 2024 national election in Venezuela. The United States' commitment to the Venezuelan National Assembly is an extension of our continued belief in the democratic peace theory. As a global superpower, our country has a responsibility to promote the spread of democracy worldwide, as well as to work against the regimes of autocrats such as Maduro. It is unfortunate that our allies in Europe appear to be losing support for this cause, though the U.S. has a decidedly greater interest being a hegemon of democracy. The U.S. will continue to support Venezuelan refugees through a combination of humanitarian aid and immigration policies. We are already the greatest donor to Venezuela, providing an estimated $3 billion worth of aid since 2017. In the last year, President Biden has signed an act that provided a temporary legal status to Venezuelans living in the U.S., around 500,000 of them. However, the same act increased the punishments for Venezuelans entering the United States illegally. Therefore, it is the United States' perspective that a combination of generous humanitarian aid coupled with strong border policies can provide Venezuela with the best source of foreign aid for its 7.7 million refugees.